Well, hello and welcome to the first ever virtual intervention. This is a joke. It is not a joke. It is something very serious, and it is something very non-serious. It is something that has been on my mind for a long time. I've talked about this. I've made references to doing a virtual intervention and other streams and other projects that I've done over the last several weeks. And it just happens to be time to do this. Now, the funny part of it is the fact that there is no friends or family or colleagues that have gathered me here to intervene in my life. This is something that I have created, and it's an opportunity for viewers to intervene into my life. So here are things that you could say. Fake Zappa, we care about you. Fake Zappa, we're concerned about you. And we know that this is not easy for us to do. And fake Zappa, we want to make sure that you get help and all that kind of stuff. So this is your opportunity. If you think I need help, which obviously I do, and I'm going to go into some gory details about my life that is not going to be funny. So most of this is serious. The funny part is the fact that, of course, this is not an actual intervention, but I'm going to pretend that it is. In fact, I might even pretend that there are concerned individuals that are leaving me chat messages and things like that. And I also have, get this, I have a bottle of, this is high-end tequila, and I'm going to be drinking from this bottle. And I also have some coconut-flavored 1800 tequila, or at least what was left of it. And I thought it would be really funny to drink out of these bottles. And I'm making a serious point here. Now, I did a project this is about 3 years ago. It seems like a long time. The last 4 years of my life have been nothing but suffering and depression and fighting and disappointment over and over again. And really, there's a point to all of this. And chances are I won't get through to anybody, but there are some people who have had folks do these intervention things on them, and they wonder why they don't work. They wonder why they're counterproductive. So this is from a peer's perspective. A peer is somebody who lives and suffers with mental health issues and things like that. So, and this is from Qdoba today. There's no alcohol in this. But I will begin by drinking out of this bottle. I don't know if I can even pronounce this. It's Corillo. Something like that. So my fake alcoholic project was something I did. I would buy a growler, if you know what a growler is. It's a big bottle that you refill beer on tap. It's kind of hip in, urban West Coast, especially the Northwest, and places where they really into their beer and stuff like that. I'm going to start with little shots here and see how that goes throughout the intervention. It's really fun to be drinking during the intervention. So what I did with this fake alcoholic project was I was trying to prove a point, and I'm writing a series of articles called Fake Zappa versus the World. And Fake Zappa versus the World is basically talking about my experiences being denied the right to have my life, to contribute as an openly gay man in environments that were not at all affirming to sexual minorities. And how weird it was to come out as mentally disabled amongst educated progressives. And I had basically the same kind of treatment. I was excluded, isolated, ignored, treated unfairly. And instead of very aggressive type confrontational people, there are very few people among educated culture that will do this sort of like front stabbing thing. There was a conversation between Stephen Colbert and I think there was a guy named Scaramouche or something that was a very short appointed guy in the Trump transition team who didn't last very long. But anyways, he basically tried to take over Colbert's show and he wouldn't let him. And one of the things he did was he gives Colbert a knife and he says, this is my front stabbing knife, because really the whole message about Scaramucci or whatever his name was, this beloved young Republican politician who didn't last very long with President Trump, and he didn't like backstabbers. He had worked with a lot of people, and ironically, he worked with a lot of progressives in New York City. And there's not as many progressive backstabbers in New York City like there are on the West Coast. Holy shit! It is really surreal how passive aggressive behavior can be really abusive to a lot of people. So his joke was he gets on Colbert and he's talking about how politics is so tired of backstabbers. So he's a front stabber. So he gives him this like golden knife or something and a plaque. And it was a big joke. But the thing is that this guy was really aggressive. And you just don't fuck with Colbert. So that was really funny. So anyways, I'm doing an article called, a series of articles called Fake Zappa versus the World. And it's basically me talking about inclusion and being an unrecognized artist and why certain artists are included, why certain disabled people are included, and how I'm met with denial everywhere I go and how surreal it is. It is really surreal because the denial is everywhere. Now, of course, it's surreal during this pandemic. It's surreal during this current administration. There's a lot of weird shit going on. I mean, we got everything but UFOs landing everywhere. I mean, they might as well. Life is so fucking weird in the world right now. However, when it comes to the certain issue of substance abuse and mental health issues, one of the things that I tried to do was, for instance, I would take a picture of me, and I don't know, I think I might have posted this, or maybe I was too afraid to, but anyways, I got a picture of me, can't tell what's in it. It was actually water, and I was drinking it at the nude beach, and I had pictures of me drinking out of this growler, because a lot of people go to the nude beach and get drunk. And so I used the hashtag fake alcoholic. Now, what is fake alcoholic? It was a statement I was making, and it's something I'm writing in depth about. So far, I've got over 40,000 words in my article. My idea is, and this doesn't work, it's just that I don't really have a lot of choices right now. I don't have a lot of alternatives. So I decided that if I'm saying something that's important to me, that I met with a lot of denial. Like folks basically trying to talk me out of it. Well, saying, well, can't you do this? And what about this? And can't you go here? And what about here? And what about these people? And what about this thing? And stuff like that. And basically they get to the bottom of their list. And instead of saying, oh, by the way, here's Buddy the cat. Hi, Buddy. Say hi. Hey, Buddy. Would you like to be the head of this intervention? I think that would be pretty cool if you were. I tell you. Now, he's a front stabber, that's for sure. I tell you. So, anyways, when it comes to passive-aggressive type folks, here's something I've noticed, especially in West Coast urban circles, And when I talk about progressives, things that I identify with being a sexual minority, I identify as closeted gay. That's a whole nother thing too. I I like to do things that are met with denial, like things that people have never heard before, like being publicly closeted. I'm sure somebody said that sometime. I just know that there's nobody that I've ever talked to that has ever met anybody who's identified as publicly closeted gay. And it seemed like 20, 30 years ago, when people would hear something new, they would kind of go tilt and they'd want to know about it. It's just that there's something really weird going on in the air today. And I think a lot of it is just information overload. So when people hear new things, their mind has to dismiss those new things. And I see this in people. I don't necessarily see what's going on in their head. I see by their behaviors. And a lot of times by people's behaviors and by what they say, and especially what they don't say, especially if they change the subject is one thing, but when they change the subject is really weird. And so there are certain things that folks don't talk about. And if there's new ideas that's coming from a source that they don't think other people are listening to, their mind will block it out. These days, there's so much information, especially misinformation, that people's brains don't know how to cope with 2020 culture. 2020 culture, the year 2020, is a time where I have never seen this much misinformation going on. And every time you hear something you should do and you shouldn't do, there is an equal amount of rhetoric. And I mean a ton of rhetoric that is going on in just about every circle that you can be exposed to that is going to give you the opposite viewpoint. And although I've been met with that over the years, it's never been so much, especially now that I'm living on the road. I have been in 10 states in just under 18 months. And, well, I spent 2 hours in Wyoming, so I don't know if that counts. But still, I did Wyoming. Next is going to be more, hopefully a little more South Dakota, and maybe some North Dakota. I should pronounce it the way they pronounce it, Dakota. Oh, and I've got another form of self-harm too that folks can intervene in my life. And I think there's some viewers that have just logged in or whatever, and I wanted to give you this opportunity to intervene in my life. Tell me that I need help. And here's the thing. In an intervention, it's not just telling somebody to get help. Is you're forcing that person to do something, whether it's in their best interest or not, whether there's help available or not. I'm going to get to that a little later. It's just that I'm going to take an hour or two to get to my point because I'm worried. I made reference to writing over 40,000 words in the last couple of months or so about a project I'm doing called Fake Zappa versus the World. It's not versus the right wing. It's not versus the left wing, although a lot of people would think I'm just fighting the left wing a lot. It's just that happens to be the community that labels themselves as the folks that I go to in order to get an audience, to get support, in order to get publicity, in order to do business with people that share my views. And it's very surprising, though, that I seem to be heard more by right-wing folks. And I think it's because of my lack of education. And here's something else I thought of, too. And this has nothing to do with this, but I just thought about this today. Okay. I was, and I also heard a reference about somebody who is gay and the right wing and all that kind of stuff, and they were talking yada yada yada. It's like, yeah, we all know, we've all heard about how most right wing Americans think of sexual minorities and how they treat sexual minorities and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I've been there. What I don't hear about is I think that there is a level of aversion towards certain sexual minorities. For instance, how does the right-wing American average traditionalist conservative think of and treat and talk about trans men and trans women. Now, I talk to a lot of Republicans. I'm talking a lot, especially going to Mount fucking Rushmore yesterday. Wow. You talk about a Trumpy haven. That was really fucking intense. So, what is it about trans women that the right wing have such a problem with? In fact, some of them don't even acknowledge the fact that there are transgendered men. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that means somebody who's born a woman who transitions into a man. Hey, Captain Beefheart is there. It says, are you planning to go to every state in the continental U.S. or just a bunch of them? Well, I've been to 35 before my trip, and I've been to 10 so far, and I think I've only been introduced to 2 or 3 new states that I haven't gone to yet. I haven't decided. So the user who goes by the name Captain Beefheart, where are you at? I might come to your state, unless it's California. I've done California twice already. Or, 2 or 3 times this last winter. And I tell you, it was the best and worst audience I ever had. And the best audience I had was in an illegal encampment. And if you look up fake Zappa, fake campaign rally, fake Zappa for president, live at Slab City, California. That was one of the worst performances I've ever done because it was totally unscripted. And it was the performance that I'm the most proud of because it was the stuff that I've always wanted to do on stage that nobody would allow me to do. And if I did, they'd kick me off stage or they would harass me or things like that. Believe me, I've been harassed. I've been kicked off stage. I have had canceled gigs, and I don't allow people in power to do that anymore. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really suffering, because the town I'm in right now, it's called Rapid City, South Dakota. And it is probably, like, when I compare it to the open doors and the closed doors, dealing with people on the right and the left, especially dealing with the LGBTQ community, the art community, the disabled community. This is by far the worst hypocrisy that I've ever seen. It is so fucking surreal. And so I just spent all day running errands around Rapid City today and just really suffering with, and I didn't really realize this until later today, I'm suffering from dissociative symptoms. And so those can be really scary. And so I think this is a really good time to do this virtual intervention project for the simple fact that it's also documenting a mental health crisis that's not getting much better. I was really suffering. This is stuff I'm going to get to more in the intervention as things get really tough, though. But yes, actually, I'm not going to talk about it yet, because the thing about an intervention is that people come to me and they assume that I'm refusing help. So that's one of the things I'm doing in this virtual intervention, is talking about how when folks see somebody who's suffering, for one thing, they don't see them as suffering. They see them as somebody who's out of control, who needs to be in control. We need to control this person. And that's usually the first thing. And then there's always this thing, you need to get help. Get help. Go get help. We'll help you get help. Which usually that doesn't happen. But sometimes sometimes in an intervention, somebody will actually help get help. But all right, so here's proof that there is some self-harm, so intervene. Tell me I'm harming myself. Oh, fake Zappa, you need to stop smoking. You're inhaling all that, well, kind of inhaling, all that tobacco smoke. It's so addictive, it's going to give you cancer, and you're going to die a slow, horrible death if you don't stop. And then what happens is everybody in the room will go around, and the subject, which in this case is me, And what makes this intervention really interesting is the fact that I am in complete control of this intervention. And so I want to talk about ways that people have intervened in my life or have tried to, what the effect has been, and the kinds of people that stage interventions, the kind of people that go to interventions. And we've all heard of these. In fact, there was a show called Intervention. And I think the whole show kind of made that whole thing look like it was really a good idea worth doing if somebody, quote, needed help. And it would be really funny if somebody actually figured out what kind of help people actually need that are doing an intervention. Because the whole thing is, you're out of control. You need to get your life back together. And all that kind of stuff. And typically it's about outward things that they see. They come to these conclusions. But before I get to more intervention stuff, I want to talk about sexual minorities and the right wing, because I wanted to finish that thought. I know it had very little to nothing to do with this intervention thing, but it was one of those unhappy thoughts that I had today. And the unhappy thought was, it's really weird that people criticize Trumpies all the time about being homophobic. But my experience of that is so different. Being on the road, I've lived in and I've stayed in some of the most conservative, flag-waving podunk towns with, firearms collectors. We're talking about ranchers and farmers and those kinds of people. And, it's always really funny. Sometimes I make crude comments too, where they're like, hey, look at that fucking cocksucker. And I'll be like, I'm a cocksucker. Literally, things like that. And, I'll just be like, well, I'm a bona fide faggot and you're talking to me and you're not flipping out about me. And they're like, oh, really? You? Oh, okay, whatever, But here's what I've noticed, though. When it comes to the aversion that people have against sexual minorities, and I'm talking about lesbian and gay and bisexual, transgender, queer people, genderqueer folks, the two-spirit type folks, the non-binary, the whole gamut of folks who have sexual interests that aren't conventional, like expressions, or gender non-conforming type people. And this is really kind of a no-brainer if you've ever lived in conservative America or a lot of places in the world, is that the tomboy, and that's not a great term, but a tomboy is basically a woman who wears pants and, kind of acts like Huckleberry Finn, and there are some guys who actually want a woman that will go fishing with them, that'll go hunting with them and all that kind of stuff. And, want to fucking a tent out in the woods, and she won't complain about makeup and stuff like that. A lot of rural American men have no problems with non-gender conforming women who act like men. It is very rare that I've noticed, and I've talked to a lot of folks, and you see this in, a lot of stuff on, I don't know about reality shows, but if you see shows where they're filming people in, rural America, you got some really butch women who've got, all kinds of firearms and stuff like that. And it's an admirable thing. However, it's a whole different thing when a man expresses femininity. Now, I admit there's some times when I get scared to wear my nightshirts outside. I've got one particular nightshirt. In fact, I don't have it handy, but anyways, it looks just like a dress. It came from somewhere in Europe, where, in some countries, men have purses, and like in Russia, men wear these elaborate scarves and they're very masculine. And then, of course, in the Middle East, they wear things that look like dresses, those white robes and stuff like that, too. And in America, it is very rare for a man, except if he's wearing a bathrobe, to wear something that resembles a dress. Well, I've got these nightshirts, and they very much look like dresses. And so far, no one's given me shit about it, especially when I walk around and my hair's down and stuff like that. Or if I'm getting fucked by a dude or something. But anyways, what I'm saying about this whole unrelated rabbit trail is that, having traveled in a lot of rural areas, hyper-conservative men seem to have a problem with men who act like women or dress like women. Not necessarily it is really rare for somebody to make references about their aversion to me having sex with men, either if I'm on the top bunk or the bottom bunk or whatever it is, so to speak. And I find that really interesting. So here's the thing: is that this is conservative America is a hyper masculine type thing. And if you try to alter or mess with that hyper masculine type cultural thing, because let's face it, these guys live in harsh climates. I mean, just last week it got down to 34 degrees, and here it is, middle of July. And then today it's, well, not so bad today, but earlier this week it was 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So, well, of course, Celsius would kill you. So conservative Americans are strong people. They're stronger in a lot of ways. I could say they could be really insecure when it comes to men expressing their femininity, especially when it comes to references to them expressing any femininity. And that's one of the reasons why I think they want to attack. They don't necessarily attack the LGBTQ community. What hyper right-wing conservative Americans do is they target certain sexual minorities. And that's my experience. That's what I see almost everywhere in everything that I hear and that I experience and stuff, is that they're targeting men who have feminine traits, which I think is interesting, that they talk about certain kinds of sexual minorities as they're having a problem with. And at the same time, they don't seem to have a lot of problems with me. And I know me, they would tell me. They're front stabbers, right? And so I find that very interesting. So anyways, that's my little spiel about this. I'm going to just take a little breather and get more lighting in here. I actually purposefully didn't turn on my professional lighting, but I think I might do that because it's just so hard to see. So I'm going to turn on a few more here. And, oh, here it is. I don't know if I don't even know if this thing is. Oh, look at this. Let there be light. Okay. Damn, I am awfully happy for an intervention. I should be really sad. I need to drink more and wallow in oh, let's see, what's the expression? I heard this from Patrick Pinson, a drum maker and a recovering alcoholic. He said, pour me a drink. Alrighty. So, oh, I got to get to some of the cheaper tequila too. I'm going to drink from this bottle of 1800 coconut flavored tequila. Okay. So, hey, Tiffany Fox. Hi, I just came on here. Okay, Tiffany, you're at the right time, because I was just doing some blabbing and I'm going to get to the meat of what I'm doing. The virtual intervention happens to be at a time in my life when I'm documenting a mental health crisis. Now, this is not the first time that I've documented a mental health crisis. Now, people document their recovery from cancer. People often document if they've had a physical injury or something like that. And they say, hey, they do a video log and they say, hey, look, I just had my cast come off of my arm and the cast on my leg is going to, and I'm going to show you clips of physical therapy and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's all nice and everything. It's just that when somebody documents themselves going through a depression, and here's the thing about depression. People that are going through a depression, they lose their ability to make choices. They lose their will. And that's what everybody gets scared of. They don't acknowledge that usually. They don't say, oh, you're suffering from a disease where you lose control of your will. What they say is, oh, you're making these bad choices. And so what happens is that an intervention is something that, well, it's obvious that an intervention is a last resort. In my experience, it is the first thing that people do. They don't ask questions. They don't do research. They don't find out what I really need. They don't find out what I'm really doing. They don't find out that there might not be help available. They make assumptions. And what they do is they sort of castrate somebody, or they kind of take their claws and their fangs out, and they disempower the person that they're trying to intervene with. So they basically do the very opposite of what it is. So anyways, I'm going to plant a bagel tree. Do you see this right here? That's a bagel seed. I'm going to plant bagels tomorrow. And then I'm going to come back in 10 years and there's going to be a big tree and I'm going to harvest a whole bunch of bagels. Do you see that? It's a beautiful little seed right there, and it's got a hole in it. Yes, so anyways, that wasn't funny. I actually got that joke from my dad. So I am going to, well, let's just imagine that, speaking of my dad, let's just imagine that my dad is logged in, my mom is logged in, my sister and aunts and uncles and whatever people in my family, or folks I used to work with, and who used to see me get out of control. They used to see my behavior and how they would respond to it, and whether they made things better or made things worse. Okay, so what is an intervention? It is basically, typically, it's a man or a younger man who isn't working, who is in some kind of substance abuse, usually drugs and alcohol or both. And maybe he's gone through some failed recovery programs, or he refuses to be in them, or he's been incarcerated, or he's been forced to be in programs and things like that. And they decide, hey, you know, we're going to strong arm this person. We're going to force this person into a place where we get to control what's going to happen. And they do this out of love. And I think there could be certain circumstances and situations where somebody is so bent on not only hurting themselves, but other people, because that's what self-harm does. Self-harm, my last partner didn't smoke or drink. He didn't even drink coffee. He didn't do any drugs. He didn't do any stuff like that. He wasn't involved in a lot of risky sexual behavior, any legal stuff or any of that kind of stuff. However, I was amazed at how this old man was able to undermine his mental health and the mental health of others that he was around by what he didn't do. And a lot of it was his thinking. A lot of it was just not coping with depression. A lot of it was denial. A lot of it was not healing from grief and things like that. And as a result, I couldn't live with this guy. Now, mind you, we were living in this travel trailer. It was really close quarters. So last August, two losses in his life. Probably the two biggest losses. His wife and his mother were both passed away first week of August, I think about a year apart, and it had only been 3 years since that. So I guess he just assumed that he's fine. It's August 3rd, it's August 2nd, it's it's the anniversary of their deaths. I'm just gonna kind of white knuckle it and I'll get through it, kind of a thing. Well, unfortunately, I had to live with him, and I had to live with all of his harmful behaviors, and not only keeping himself up at night, but keeping me up. And my sleep is really important, and things like that. So I had to decide what to do, and of course, there was nobody else to sit him down and say, "Hey, we need to get you in a mental health thing," or something like that. But he did allow me to take him to a couple of places to see about getting some mental health care. And then it turned out that I ended up looking like the bad guy, which really sucked. Because here's the thing, is that the people staging the intervention, they have to be powerful, recognized people that are heard. And that's really a big deal, which is really interesting, because if I try to intervene into somebody's life and no one gives a shit about what I say or what I think, it doesn't matter. But here's the thing, is that I didn't know what to do. The only thing I could do was to say, "Hey, I can't live with this, so you're going to have to find another place, and I'm going to give you plenty of time to do that. And if you don't, then I'm either just going to drop you and the dogs off at a church or a senior center or something like that," and just to say, "Hey, I cannot take care of this man." Well, that terrified him. That was probably there was one thing I did to hurt him. But here's something I haven't said publicly when it comes to this, and this is a principle that I think people that are involved in interventions, I think, really need to understand before they think about doing an intervention of some kind. So here's my self-harm, which is tobacco smoking. I haven't smoked for a week. and of course, everybody knows about these. You don't really inhale very much at all. But it's just the image of somebody smoking gets people to think, "Oh my God, self-harm, I got to stop him." So about halfway through this little pouch of tobacco, I bought this last year, and I still haven't even gotten through half of it. Oh, in fact, I gave some of it away too. But still, people see a bottle of tequila, whether there's actual tequila in it or not, and it triggers them, and they make up their mind. They think, "Oh my God, this guy's out of control. He needs help. What are we going to do?" And although there's a lot of sincere motives involved in that, I want to talk about the interventions. So this is the point where a lot of people are going to really get freaked out. But if you've ever been the subject of an intervention, or you've been involved in one where you thought, "This ain't working, and I don't know why it's not working. We did everything right. We sat him down, we hugged him, we told him we loved him, we made sure we listened to him, and we tried to do everything textbook perfect, and he's still drinking, he ended up worse, or he ended up in jail, or he ended up killing himself, or something like that." This is a really sad thing, and I'm going to get right to this, because this is something that I am really ashamed of, and I also made a discovery that I've never heard anybody else talk about, and it is really fucking scary, but it really affected me in a powerful way, because I realized that when I threatened my partner, now this was last August, and mind you, my partner at the time, I called him Yogi Bear, 21 years older than me. And he's very new to anything when it came to mental health, especially being gay. I mean, he had a wife for over 20 years, another wife for over 20 years. He had to basically pull the plug on her. He had a really sad life, and he never really dealt with his mental health stuff. And the only thing he was addicted to was Diet Coke and negative bullshit, And when I felt like it was my last resort, that I had to do something forceful to get him to stop hurting himself and hurting me, mind you, he had been suicidal earlier that year, and he was starting to get suicidal again for the third time that year. And that scares me as well. In fact, at the psych ward a year and a half ago, he even told me how he was going to kill himself. And I'm like, I didn't even want to know that, but it was just, there was a worker there and I was there, and it was just like, oh, fuck. I mean, I love this guy so much. And it was so sad to hear how he could be living under my roof and be that close to taking his life. So yeah, I was scared, and fear will make you do really fucked up, abusive, horrible things that are entirely justified in your mind. And at that time, I was trying to survive. And so I'll get to the point. This is what scared me. And this is what, yes, thank you, Tiffany. This is what scared me. Is that when I threatened him, because I own the trailer, I'm paying for the RV park rental and all that kind of stuff. It was my right, it was my authority to tell whoever it is that's living with me to get lost or not. And so when I told him that if he didn't stop these horrible behaviors, that I was going to leave him somewhere. I wasn't breaking up. I just couldn't live with him, and I was going to find him a place to stay. Okay, here's the weird part. Here's the scary part. Here's the really, really scary part. I felt justified pleasure and power. I felt peace. I felt like I was right. I was safe. I was happy. It felt good to threaten him. I will say that again. It felt good to threaten the man I love. And that was the thing that undermined our relationship. For 3 months, he held that grudge against me because it hurt him so bad that I would even consider doing something like that. Although it was an empty threat, I apologized to him. We did end up surviving for another 3 months, but he resented that the whole time. I didn't realize how badly it hurt him. Here's what's so scary, is that I enjoyed it. I'll say that again. I enjoyed threatening him because I felt like, one, that was the only choice I had to make. 2, it was within my power and it was within my means. 3, it was fully justified. 4, it seemed like, and it might have actually been, the right thing to do. And not only that, it made me feel empowered. It made me feel safe. And at the same time, I was being abusive. It was the wrong thing to do. And I was intervening in his life. So this is what an intervention can do to the subject. And not only that, to the people who are in charge of the intervention, especially the person who coordinated the whole intervention, which is usually a patriarch or matriarch, the head of a family, or if they're involved in an organization or something like that, or if it's just friends. So I'm going to give you a story about somebody I worked with who did an intervention. And the kind of people that do interventions. And here's the dark side of it, is that when somebody does an intervention, whether it's necessary or not, and most of the time it's not, because the people doing these interventions are typically not mental health professionals. And if they are mental health professionals, that actually makes it even more fucked up because you're dealing with powerful, powerful people. And I know that when I'm in crisis and I'm being mistreated by mental health professionals, all day they're hearing, oh, you think you're a mental health professional? Well, I'm not crazy. You're the crazy one, blah, blah, blah. And it's like they have to block that stuff out. So here's what happens is that I'm going to talk about, okay, the subject is the person, like in this instance, it's me. I'm going to talk about an intervention, a very small one that had to do with my mother. And I didn't warn anybody when this live stream was going to happen. I just kept saying for several weeks, it's going to happen. I'm going to do a virtual intervention. And I didn't really go into detail about what exactly I was going to do. And really what my point is. But anyways, the subject is the person that they're trying to intervene. And I'm going to give you examples about how counterproductive it can be and what could really be behind an intervention. Now, earlier today, I was listening to, I think her name was Mary. Mary Trump is President Donald Trump's only niece. And she has spoken out in a book about what it's like having grown up with Donald Trump as her uncle, and her father was considered like the runt of the family. Oh, that's just the alcoholic guy. Oh, he's a nice guy, but he's such a loser, and he just lost, and he made a lot of bad choices and stuff like that. Well, here's what's interesting about hyper powerful families, and I come from a semi hyper powerful family, not as much as the Trumps, but I tell you, they're way more like Trumps than most educated progressives that you've probably met. And there's a lot of reasons why I had to distance myself from my family. And some of this intervention stuff has to do with how they treat me, how they talk about me. But most of the time, they are the backstabbing type. Here's the thing, is that they know that if they plan an intervention and they get a bunch of people in a room together, and not only that, they live all over the country, so they really can't do it anyways. I think they know me well enough that they're not going to get me to do anything. And it's going to be, yeah. I wish they would. I've always thought it'd be really cool if they did an intervention and said, Jason, you need to get help. You need to get help, and we care for you, and we're here for you, and all you got to do is just make that call and all this kind of stuff. And I would sit there and ask some questions. Okay, is there help available? Have I sought help? What kind of help do I need? And of course, what's the root of the problem that's making me suffer so much? And not only that, can we acknowledge that the subject is the one who is doing most of the suffering? Because that usually doesn't happen in intervention. I've never actually seen that TV program, but I would imagine it is such bullshit. And I'm sure it's very unrealistic because, reality shows, they pick and choose who they want to represent what they think reality is really like. So here's what I think. I think that if people stage an intervention, it makes them feel like they're doing the right thing. And this rightness is what we criticize the religious right wing of doing. For instance, they want legislation based on different forms of ancient texts that are moral codes, and most of them don't apply today because there were times when eating pork was really harmful, but still people avoid pork thinking that somebody created this universe and says you can't eat pigs. And if you do, it's just bad. And if you don't eat pigs, then you're right. And when you're right, you feel good. When you're right, you feel safe. When you're right, you feel like you can justify overpowering other people that eat pigs. I don't think I had any pork today. I should have, though. I had chicken. So, I did have beef, and there are some holy people that don't eat beef. Well, there we go. So, anything you do, there's going to be some religion or some ideology that's going to say, that's wrong and I'm right. And they feel very empowered to do that. So, here's the thing, is that when it comes to an intervention, if you look at it from the perspective of power, who's in power, why do they want, oh, Captain Beefheart, thank you. You also had chicken today, you fucking sinner! You're going to go to hell based on the ideology of the Church of the 1800 tequila people. Oh, that's good stuff. Let's see how much of this I can drink. Woo! All right. You feel like intervening? Tell me. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to think. Tell me that I'm out of control and that I'm not doing everything that I can to get the help that I need. That's what the subject is there for. But it's interesting how families that have this underdog, that have the loser, the failure, whatever, It is interesting that from a power perspective, if you think about people who live their lives gaining influence, defending that influence, and actually relying on that influence that they have over others, and that's what they call success a lot of times, is they actually depend on their loser brother or their niece or whoever it is in their family that they like to point to and say, oh, well, this person is the embarrassment. Oh, we've tried to help this person for years and this person just keeps messing up, keeps failing and stuff like that. Here's the feed off of the energy of that individual, that so-called loser. They need that loser for them to feel better. They need somebody below them in order for them to feel like they're above somebody, and they depend on that. That's why there's people that are obsessed with getting into management. They'll do anything. They'll kiss ass until they get to that position. They abuse their power. We've seen this. We've all seen this. So how does this happen in intervention? I think that most interventions are a really good example of the abuse of power and harmful mental health practices. And I will tell you about the most harmful intervention, and I was not the subject of this particular one, but I was one of the instigators. I was one of the interveners, I will say. Okay, picture this. The year is 2005. The town is Dry Ridge, Kentucky, at a place called Pure Life Ministries. This was a sexual addiction recovery program for men, particularly gay and bisexual men who have been kicked out of programs like Teen Challenge. They needed something a little harsher, and that was the best available program that I could have gotten into because I wanted to be a heterosexual. But I tell you, after going through that and thinking, man, what crime did I commit to go through something like this? This was more abusive than any program that I've ever met any conversion therapy survivor has ever been in before. And I think that's one of the reasons why folks are so afraid to tell my story. Just because it's very triggering, it's very graphic. And this experience was one of them. And thank God I wasn't in the mercy chair. In fact, I did an art exhibit they called it Mercy. And I did this in 2015 in Portland, Oregon. And one of the art pieces that I did, and I still have it, it's in storage in Oregon somewhere, is an old wooden chair with nails this long coming out of that. So it's not a chair you want to sit in. It's a chair full of nails. But here's the thing is I'm going to try to make I've got this online. It's in my conversion therapy story. It's actually published in a book too, which was left out. And then I had to make them add it in there later. Because I'm like, this is like the most fucked up thing that happened in straight camp. That's in a book called A Queer Disability Anthology. I actually republished that story on fakezappa.com on my blog. So if you want to go to fakezappa.com/blog, over the last couple of months or so, I published a few articles that were written about my conversion therapy story. And what it is there's over 50 men in a circle in a dimly lit room and one guy in a chair in the middle. And they literally wrote on the chair a little sign that said, Mercy. Because when you're practicing judgment, you got to call it something else. Ironically, it was a young black man that was in the mercy chair. And his name was Justin. And he suffered from a lot of physical as well as mental and emotional suffering as well. I mean, the guy was really fucked up. And so everybody was trying to cure him, and he'd kind of walk around like he had a chip on his shoulder, and he would be humiliated even during a church service, Justin, you blah, 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 and you need to do this, and everybody's looking at him. I mean, if that ain't bad enough, they actually had this whole thing set up just for him, and they called it a light session, Light, the light session. And they instructed all of us to take turns, and we were to come up with not only just a criticism of something that we didn't like about him, or something we thought that needed to change, or something we thought we could preach at him that he needed to repent or whatever of his sins. We had to come up with 3 things. a hard time doing it. And I remember they were like correcting me. Okay, you got to. So I did. That was one of the things I'm ashamed of, is that I was a part of being an intervener in something that really hurt somebody, that really upset him, and it didn't do any good. Now, they've said that, oh, they've done this before, and they have the guy in the middle, and he just breaks down and cries and says he's sorry, and he has some kind of breakthrough, and, well, yeah, maybe he's acting, maybe there's something real to that, but what are the long-term effects? You just simply cannot humiliate somebody. You cannot simply overpower them and take their power away and expect it to do any good. Now, if it's a last resort situation, if you've really tried everything, and if everybody involved in that is completely, and I'm sure this is impossible, if they have the motives where they are really giving that person power, they are really helping that person to have a better life, basically, to stop suffering, to alleviate their suffering, then yeah, I think an intervention would work. Here's the thing, though, is that the interveners get to decide what kind of help that person needs. And here's the thing, when somebody's out of control, they basically lost their power. When somebody does an intervention, they're taking a person who's lost their power and overpowering that person. They don't give that person power. So here's the other thing, is that when you have a room full of people who are powerful or more powerful than the subject, basically these interveners are saying, we're in power, we're in control. Your problem is you don't have enough power, you don't have enough control. And we're going to strip you of whatever power you have left. So wouldn't it be funny if there was an intervention where they ask the subject, hey, we want to do an intervention. What time works good for you? Would you like to do it? So the guy has a choice whether to have his own intervention. I'm using him as a because I've seen this mostly with men for some reason. I guess because I'm just so hard-headed. And I think what happens is that if there was an abuser, a really serious abuser, and for some reason they didn't have enough evidence to send this abuser to jail or something like that, and they all want to tell the person how he's abused them, that might be a different situation, though. But still, though, when it comes to people that are alleged abusers, somebody who's suffering and they lose control, they're not interested in being polite. They're not interested, like when someone's in a mental health crisis, they're drowning. They are underwater emotionally, mentally. They just simply cannot function. And so I think people need to be aware that that's the kind of situation that they're dealing with. And it seems like an intervention is going to happen when somebody is in a mental health crisis. So anyways, I have been the subject of an intervention before. So as it's now 9 o'clock on Mountain Time, I'm going to go into the only intervention that I can call an intervention that's ever happened in my life. It was also in Kentucky. Here it was. I went right from straight camp to working in sweatshops all night and basically undermining my mental health in every way possible and not having any way to get out. And I might have a family send me a little bit of money, but I was homeless, I was at risk, and the only place that felt safe for me was my partner at the time. His name was Tom. And Tom was a great guy 29 days out of the month. But every month or two, he would become the worst abuser, mentally, emotionally, verbally threatening. He'd threaten to kill me. He'd corner me. He knew how to give me panic attacks where I'd fall apart. I couldn't function. He was cruel at times. And I called the police on him before. I tried calling LGBT advocate. I tried talking to local government saying I'm in an abusive situation. I'm at risk for being homeless. I'm scared. I'm mentally ill. I need to be on disability. What do I do? Well, for some reason, especially in Kentucky, if you're a 33-year-old man, they're like, so what? It just like didn't occur to them that a disabled person, although most people define what disabled is, and I typically don't fit that definition. So here's the thing: is that this whole intervention thing, it is rare that it focuses on the suffering of the individual. What it focuses on is their behaviors, and of course, the way they're annoying other people. And here's the big thing: is that they need an object. And this is something I've been writing about. They need an object. And typically that object is some type of substance, drugs or alcohol. They want you to drink. They want you to get into hard drugs, because then they point to something and say, no, this person isn't suffering. He's an addict. He's an addict. Take the drugs away, take the alcohol away, and then walk away and think he's cured. He's good. Okay. Now you better not touch that stuff again, or we'll come after you again. We'll take it away. That's how most high-functioning people think when it comes to what they call dual diagnosis. Dual diagnosis is somebody who has mental health issues, whether diagnosed or treated or not, or whatever, whether they're on disability or not, and some type of substance abuse thing, including cannabis, which I think is interesting. There's a lot of folks who have gone through cannabis addiction recovery. And I think when it comes to medical use of cannabis, I think that's way more silly than people who take benzodiazepines for the same thing. Benzodiazepines are the heroin of the mental health community. They are incredibly addictive, and there are so many people that are trapped. And here's the thing: is that somebody could go through an intervention and go through drug and alcohol addiction counseling, and they can appear like they're doing good. And their doctor could prescribe them Xanax or some type of sleep aid. Or there's a whole bunch of benzodiazepines. Of course, we all know Valium, but, there's so much stigma with, ooh, he's on Valium. But then again, if you stay, Xanax is way more fucked up than Valium, because, it kicks in within 20 minutes and you're high as a kite. Valium, it comes in real slow. It's not as powerful, but it's the same basic molecular structure, which is tweaked a little bit, which is what the whole benzodiazepine family, Ativan, and I can't think of the other ones right now. There was a guy who was hooked on them that I was hanging out with a couple months ago, and he was so fucked up, especially benzos and alcohol. Oh my God. But here's the thing: you take away the alcohol, and they're taking benzodiazepines that their doctors prescribed. They think, oh, he's cured, he's okay. And so there's this weird idea of when somebody's okay and when they're not okay. Typically, if somebody like me is annoying people, that's not okay. It's not that I'm suffering. It's just that I'm a nuisance. I'm annoying people. And that's what I'm going through right now in my life as a touring artist, is I am a nuisance. I am a major nuisance. In fact, in the last 7 days, I've been more of a nuisance to more people than I've been in a long time. And I'll get to that. It's part of my fake Zappa versus the world thing too, is that what happens is that when somebody's ignored, it really fucks with people. And even when you give a little bit of attention to somebody, it does change their behaviors. It's really interesting. I was just outside an hour ago, and I'm eating a frozen entree and hanging out with Buddy the cat on a picnic table. And there's this young man, maybe middle school, maybe younger. He's wearing a helmet. He's on a dirt bike, and he's zooming around this RV park. He stopped, but anyways, he kept doing this over and over and over again. So I decided what would happen if I just watched him and smiled and waved, Well, the more I watched him, he started doing tricks. And I thought he probably wouldn't have done those tricks if nobody was watching him, And so that's how powerful it is just to watch somebody, just to give them attention. So what kind of power can we have if we ignore people? If watching somebody, giving them our attention affects their behaviors, how does it affect somebody's behavior when we ignore them? And I know that for a fact. And in fact, this has really been an interesting day today. I gotta go. I've got to put a new battery in this camera here. But I'm going to tell you a story today that is really fucked up. And I think I really don't have too much more battery power in this thing yet. But, oh my God. There are some places around the country, and it's always different everywhere I go. But typically, there's the same thing that I see. And the thing that I see is the addiction to and the abuse of power. Oh, gosh. Oh, here it is. My other battery. Yay. Okay. So, I also wanted to record this on another camera just because my live streaming can sometimes have issues. So, anyways, Captain Beefhearty checking today. Yay. Okay. So, here's what happened today. Let's go back 2 days ago when I did some more. I've done sidewalk chalk activism in a couple of national parks here lately. Yellowstone, I made a reference to suicide in sidewalk chalk in Yellowstone National Park last week because of a story I'm going to tell later, which is really sad. I'm going to be very vulnerable. That's the thing about fake Zappa, is that I love to do things that are disgustingly not fake, because there's so many things that are fake that people call real. Like I was talking, I was overhearing a conspiracy theory guy, and then yesterday I talked to another conspiracy theory guy that, China created the virus to kill old people and all this kind of stuff. And I said, oh yeah, I've heard a lot of that before. I've heard a lot of theories. He said, no, it's the truth. Oh gosh, here we go again. So I walked away. Every time I hear someone say the truth, especially old white men, it's the truth. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's the truth. It's like, oh gosh. I need to connect again here. I'm on a, okay. Can you guys hear me okay? I had a problem with my connection, but I think I'm back. Because I want to get to this story. It's really cool. Because there's a place called the Dahl Art Center, DAHL, of Rapid City, South Dakota. And I felt like they treated me very unfairly when I just wanted to rent out one of their places to do a private event. And then just being involved in an open mic and getting the runaround and just like some real serious bullshit, like really weird, like, wow. So I decorated their sidewalk last week and sang and screamed and really made a fuss. And then last Tuesday, I went to this disabled arts center, which really excludes a lot. I mean, they exclude most people who would identify as a disabled artist. I mean, and they have a really good reputation. So I wrote some of my story there in sidewalk chalk, and that was 2 days ago. It hasn't rained since then. So anyways, I went over there today when I was running errands. Oh, it's the art center. And I drove by. I don't see my sidewalk chalk there. So I drove by it closer and thought, where did it go? And I by that time I was at the end of the block. And I'm like, fuck, fuck it. And I'm like, I'm going to park right here. I didn't even pay for parking. I just ran out of my truck and ran up the block and looked around and thought, holy, I got pictures of it. I'm going to post. I'm going to call it fake Zappa erase, because I thought, holy shit, they literally erased my story that I was trying to say about how I was excluded from this organization, that people need to look into this. And what was really sad is I stuck around to these places. Especially, I think one of the saddest one was when I did Sidewalk Chalk yesterday at the Mount Rushmore National Monument, when they had this little statue head of the guy who's the artist. What's the artist name? He's got this ridiculous name. It's like, oh gosh, it's anyways. Guy that was in charge of organizing the carving of the 4 presidential heads on get the sacred native land was very close to the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, this was a major KKK guy, and I'm sitting there doing some research on this. Oh God, I can't remember his. I'll have to look it up. But anyways, you just do a search for Mount Rushmore artist and KKK, and it's really weird what you end up finding out. So anyways, I did this little drawing of a heart that had the name of the artist and says, loves the KKK. And I decided to stick around for a little bit. And right away, there were 2 families that came by. One of them was this lady who got really mad, and she started sliding her foot over some of the sidewalk chalk. You know, like, this is a disgrace. Like, how could they desecrate American history like this? It's like, actually, him being involved in the KKK, that is American history. In fact, that there's a lot of people that we respect that had a lot of ties to a lot of hate crimes. And I thought it'd be really interesting if people would know about it. And then that happened again. It really scared me too, because I thought, holy shit. You know, they say the pen is more powerful than the sword. I tell you what, sidewalk chalk doesn't do very much, because out of all the places I'm talking about, Portland, Oregon, Lake Havasu, Arizona especially, I did one of my biggest displays there. Oh, and in Portland, there was like 8 places around Portland, Oregon. Oh, that was really depressing, because I went and I talked about abuse that I suffered even as a child in different places, who enabled some horrible abuse when I was a kid and did nothing. And so when I wrote it on the ground, it felt really good. And then it's really weird to go back and see people erase it. So when I saw that today, it had literally been, I don't know how it looked like it had been swept. It looked like they had a broom and they swept it, and there was a little bit of residue left, but there were no words left. And I thought, oh my God. So when it comes to people, especially men that are disempowered, I meet a lot of men who are disempowered. In fact, one of the guys who saw my fake Zappa hat, he was on disability. And I could tell he was very disempowered. He just had that vibe to him. And it's just, you can tell when people are in a place of influence, especially when you look at their fucking social media numbers. But there's an energy to that. And that energy tells people whether that person has enough value to be heard, to be considered. So the fact that people are listening to me now is like, cool. There are a few people out there that actually think that I have enough value to listen to something that's called a virtual intervention. But I haven't even gotten to my sad story about how somebody tried to intervene in my life and the effect it had. And I haven't really spoken publicly about what it's like to be raised by a hypnotherapist who was also, for several years, an alcoholic. It's just that the weird thing is that recovery programs, for one thing, recovery programs can be really abusive, because they have a very vulnerable set of clientele, and they have to hire people that are really assertive, and they often get people that work there because people that are addicted to power want to surround themselves with powerless, vulnerable people. So recovery programs are a hotbed for leaders who are addicted to power and who want to surround themselves with people they can overpower and get away with it. Because here's the thing, is that when you got some drunk that comes in there and he complains about whatever, hey, this person's abusing me, they cornered me, they threatened me, and they're like, yeah, right. We hear that all the time, and most of it's a lie. But if it's true, you know, what happens? What happens is that the person gets out of that program, they're even more disempowered, and they're traumatized. And there's typically so much stigma. I mean, there's almost as much stigma as coming clean after being an addict as there is actually being an addict. In fact, it actually works better for a lot of people that an addict actually drinks and gets high. That actually helps a lot of economic situations. It actually helps a lot of people who feel like they need to be in that place of power. Believe me, there are a lot of people who want me to drink because they want to point to it and say, finally, this guy isn't suffering. Look, all we got to do is take away the bottle and everything will be okay. So what happens is that somebody gets out of these programs, and for one thing, here's something that I've noticed. Okay, I have spent over a month around, I mean, with the exception of going out to Yellowstone and staying in the Bighorn, Longhorn Mountains, whatever it is. I go to so many places I can't remember. But really, I've been in this area now, South Dakota and Wyoming, for about 5 or 6 weeks. And Rapid City has been kind of the hub where I've done most of my business, or tried to rather. And everybody I've come in contact with has treated me very unfairly. There's been a couple of places I've done business with. I actually had a really good mechanic yesterday, believe it or not. And but other than that, my favorite people that I've come across, and I hate to use this term, but this is what happens when you go to a lot of places around the country. They have what they call, oh, those are the drunk natives. Oh, drunk natives. Oh, they're just drunk natives. Oh, did you see that? Oh, don't let that drunk native in here, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's one of the saddest derogatory terms that I've heard from people that you wouldn't think would be using those terms. But I found them to be my favorite people that I've hung around with. In fact, there was one moment that just doesn't happen. I don't get help and support. What I do is I get exploited, I get used, and I get folks that want to mess up my art. And except for I think Builder Bill, when he let me do my fake campaign rally and a couple things at an open mic, I had people basically undermining and being very unsupportive of my projects. So yay for Native Americans, yay for folks who are suffering. And alcohol is, for a lot of people, their reason to live. And if you're in certain places, it's crystal meth. Crystal meth gives people a reason to live. And you take away that, they're going to kill themselves, or they're going to find another reason to live. And it's typically an abusive relationship. It's typically an abusive religion or something to that effect. And if not, they're going to self-destruct, and they're going to end up in being institutionalized somehow, typically prison. Now, one of the really fucked up things about South Dakota, and this is sad because I've been to so many places, and as fucked up as Arizona is, South Dakota is probably the worst place I have been in my travels. It's just that, you know, there's casinos everywhere, there's greed everywhere, there's hyper-conservative racists, and there are a lot of power-hungry, urban, progressive, educated, artistic-minded folks that label themselves as affirming and tolerant, and they move here from places like Austin, Texas, San Diego, California, and places like that, because they think if they go to a wonderful, magical place like South Dakota, where there's magical Indians and all this, amazing stuff, then everything's going to be okay. But really, it's the same exclusive mentality of snobbery. And this stuff has pushed me over the edge into, going into a major depression from the month of June, feeling like I was getting over it. And then I got bullied by somebody who was a leader, who was an author that I'd been familiar with for about 10 years in the gay community, in the LGBT community. And he so bullied me that it actually caused me to have my first real drunken experience. And I'm not talking about booze bottles filled with water. I'm talking about real fucking tequila. I'm talking about, like, I think over 12 ounces of tequila and a couple ounces of some rum and some other stuff too that really put me in a dangerous position. And here I am in a national park, and I'm glad I didn't get caught, because that would have caused a lot of problems. I'm glad I sobered up before I drove, and I'm glad I didn't drink myself to do any permanent harm. But that was really sad, and that was a direct result of a bullying incident from one of the leaders in the LGBTQ community, because I was trying to resolve an issue with a publication. And I'm still trying to resolve that. It's one of my projects that I have been working on. In fact, I'm just starting to put myself at risk because I am going public about some of my interactions with some of these people. So, what is going on, buddy? Oh, it's his little wild time here. Meow, meow. That cat is an asshole. That cat is an asshole. Meow, meow, meow. If you don't know what I'm singing about, that's, if there's such a thing as a fake Zappa hit song, it's called That Cat is an Asshole. Speaking of Slab City. Oh, one of the things I did was, for this intervention, like these booze bottles, and I have a literal trash can here. and this is the way my trailers looked over the last several weeks. Really, it's just clutter everywhere, and I get half of it picked up, and then it gets cluttered again. But that is a sign of depression. Is that here's the thing: is that when you see folks that don't care about anybody, they don't care about themselves or anything, or they just look lazy, or they just look irresponsible, a lot of times those are signs that somebody could be going through a mental health crisis. And depression is a fatal disease, because if it's unchecked, it will lead to self-harm. Somebody will get out of control. And that's what's been going on with me too. And so I am at this point, according to various definitions, borderline alcoholic. And it's really scaring me. And I want to take a different approach, because I know that if I go into one of those programs, that I'm not only exposing myself to COVID and having a weak immune system and having been traumatized by recovery programs, I know that would be counterproductive. I also know that there is one thing in my life that I need to make my life worth living, and it is the one thing that everybody is afraid to give me, and that is a voice, giving me a voice. That gives me power. When I'm heard, it gives me power. When I'm seen, it gives me power. And unfortunately, I'm having to put myself at risk in order to be seen. And I think those folks erasing my words is a great example of how folks want to take somebody who they're scared is going to be heard and literally erase. So yes, it's funny. I did an article last year called Fake Zappa Erased about kind of my spoof on the movie in the book called Boy Erased. And everybody seems to love that movie because you just can't criticize, a movie about a conversion therapy survivor unless you're me. And unless you're me and I look at that movie and I think, oh my God, that guy was that trauma or so-called trauma that guy experienced was a fucking picnic compared to what I went through. And not only that, I mean, this guy has so many privileges. I tell you, you watch Boy Erased, you watch that movie, and you just compare that guy to a homeless person. You think, oh my God, being college educated and having all that community and all that support and then celebrity status and all this kind of stuff. Holy shit. So it's no wonder why they don't want to hear my story. And this is what's sad is that everybody that every single person that identifies as some kind of progressive is in total denial about certain people, and I'm one of those people. And that's what's so surreal about this kind of stuff is that educated folks that are supportive of the LGBT community, and they see a lot of things in the media. It's just they're so misrepresented. I mean, grotesquely misrepresented. And I think if you go to a company called Pride Media does Out Magazine, they do The Advocate, they do stuff like that that has to do with mainstream gay community. Occasionally, they'll do an article about disabled popular celebrity people or, some sexual minorities that might not be represented as much, like the gay bear community, they'll do a little bit. But, it's all about social status from my perspective. So that's what happens when you try to be heard when you're the type of person that is not heard. I still haven't got to my horrible intervention here, and I can't believe you guys are sticking around. And I'm really thankful. And what I was going to do is I was going to pretend that my mom and dad were online and, try to respond to that. But this is turning into something else. I have a lot to say about this. And so the virtual intervention is really just me talking about my mental health crisis right now. And it's gotten about as bad as it's been in a long time. And it's not getting any better. Every year, around middle of December all the way through about the end of January is typically when I go through a major depression. Not so much this year. Actually, things started really looking up in January. But it was hard though being alone during all the holidays, spending middle of nowhere and Thanksgiving and stuff. That was hard. But every year in June is a tough time for me. And it's typically because, having a lonely childhood and school getting out, everybody's like, yay, no more school. I'm thinking like school, that was a safe place for me. But that was a place I could get out of the house. That was the place I could do my art and actually be seen, by more people. And I had great teachers going to school. I went there for 12 years. It was a great nurturing environment for me. So summers were horrible. Summers were lonely. It was like living in a dungeon for me. And very rarely did I have enough stuff to keep me busy. I just wasted away all summer. So June was like this horrible thing for me. Like, oh my God, I really hope I have friends this year. I really hope I can do something fun this year, not sit around in the house. So yeah, it still triggers me. And every year I think, okay, this June, I'm just going to let it pass, and I'm going to be okay. But yeah, I couldn't hardly work at all. I couldn't hardly pay attention to projects. And I was mentioning earlier about being dissociating and stuff like that, which has really been scary because, I like to reuse cups. And I always finish the whole soda, whatever, or iced tea or whatever I'm doing. This is right now my own natural concoction. But yeah, yesterday I left a half a soda at the mechanic. I never do that stuff. And I got lost. I kept getting lost everywhere, and I kept forgetting like things. It took me forever to go shopping. It's embarrassing. And sometimes when I'm in a small store and I have to go through every aisle 3 or 4 times. When I'm in crisis, that's what it's like. And not only that, but I got people that are looking at me funny. They're laughing, making jokes about me, making jokes about, oh, what kind of drugs are you on, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I don't think it's funny because I'm suffering. It's hard thing. It's hard enough to suffer. It's hard enough to not function, to not have any help or support, to try to do everything alone. It takes a long time. And sometimes I don't get anything done. And it's scary. So, anyways, that's been that's been my week. So, not nearly as bad as what was going on 15 years ago. So here it is. I had just come out of straight camp into working sweatshops, and I'm 32 years old, and I'm physically getting hurt. When I first got with Tom, for one thing, he actually heard me sing and play music. I did a lot of gospel music then, and he recognized. It was like, wow. And then he looked at my hands, and I had pieces of metal. I had pieces of steel that were stuck in my hands because I was making axles all night in a factory. And he said, "You got to stop doing that." So I moved in with him, and it was hard because here I am traumatized, and here he's neither of us had been in a relationship with the guy. And we both had major issues. I mean, Tom had his daddy issues, where he had an alcoholic father that would throw beer bottles across the room and scream and yell. He would drive home drunk, and then he would get out of his car and he couldn't even make it to the front door sometime. And that was Tom's dad. Edwin Beatham was really something else. And so Tom, he had that explosive anger as well. And there were times I'd lose control and I'd be really suffering, and he would come and just give me a hug. And he was such a bear. He was 6'6" at one time in his life. And I think when I met him, he was like 365 pounds. He had the best bear hugs ever. And, I still think he was the best. If there was such thing as true love, it would be my Tommy Bear. And it was sad that he was so abusive. And then there was a time around Christmas when I totally lost it. I was in the shower, and I lost control. He started screaming. He cornered me and started screaming at me and all this stuff. And then I would have to go to church and lead a worship service that morning. It was horrible. And I had to quit. So I was trying to tell the church about that. And the church, meanwhile, was just being this really disgusting, stereotypical gay culture cocktail party bullshit thing that I wasn't ready for. I mean, it was really, it was culture shock for me. It was like the kind of shit I grew up in. And I was really angry at how they were treating me, and how hard the work was, how stressful it was, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I told them I was going to resign in a couple of weeks. Well, they freaked out. And there was things said behind my back that weren't even true. And there was a guy waiting in line trying to get my job. I mean, it was just a disgusting example of church politics and gay politics all mixed into the same thing. With me, a freshly traumatized guy who could not get support. I could not get mental health care. I would call them. They'd put me on a fucking waiting list. I could not get therapy, no matter how fucked up, how much, what kind of suffering I was doing. The gay community, the mental health community, even the gay affirming church community was not acknowledging the fact that I just went through an incredibly traumatic program. And not only that, though, it was, I really, based on this situation, I really didn't have a choice. Like somebody just recently posted a comment that he didn't realize, what do you mean you didn't have a choice? It's like, wow, this was another former ex-gay leader. So there's just, a lot of misinformation about when people lose control of their will. When people are traumatized, they lose control of their will. They simply cannot take care of themselves. And here it was, I was the one making calls to everybody that I could in that area to try to get help, and there was no help. I was so mad. Well, it could put you on a 6-month waiting list. That was all. So I was on a fucking waiting list. Okay, well, to make things worse, I invited my mother to come to Kentucky and to stay with us for about a week or so. And so anyways, she got to talking to Tom. Now, meanwhile, I warned Tom. I said, okay, my mother's coming over. You realize that she's a hypnotherapist. She's a very powerful person. She can get in your head. So just keep that in mind, okay? Oh, yeah, sure. Hey, okay, yeah, that's fine. Well, she got in his head right away. I mean, holy shit. She had my partner believing things about me that were just so far off, so far gone. So I was really upset because I had gotten a letter from the church that was basically scolding me for resigning. And it really triggered me. It really upset me. So I was really upset. And here it's me, my mother, Tom, and his mother, who is like 90 and very much a dementia patient. Really, really messed up environment to be in. Basically no support. Because when my mother was around, he was completely siding with her no matter what was going on in reality. This is how powerful this woman is. And folks don't realize that. And I warn people. It happened a couple years ago. She turned some people against me. That's another story. It's really sad. It's one of the reasons why I was really glad to leave my hometown. So that's what an intervention can do when somebody is addicted to power and somebody's using hypnotic suggestion to control others, to dominate a situation, to create a problem that wasn't even there, or to create a false solution. This is what happened in my quote intervention. It was a spontaneous thing. So anyways, what happened was I was really upset. I said, I need to be alone or something like that. I went down to the basement and then here both of them come down, and they actually, one sat next to me and the other one was like, there was a couch like this and then a chair right here. So I was like in the middle, there was a person here and a person here right next to me. So I could have struggled and physically gotten up, but here's the thing is that leaving an intervention, the subject leaves an intervention, that's something that actually empowers the interveners too. It's like, oh, he's in such denial, he just left and he got mad, oh, we tried, kind of a thing. So here's the thing is that an intervention, for the most part, is put somebody in a checkmate situation. Basically, they set up a board game. They say, okay, Jason, we're going to play a game and you're going to lose. No matter where you go, we're going to make up the rules as we go along. We're in control, we're in power, and you have to play. So I just went along with it. And my mother's like, Jason, you really need to get help. You really need mental health care. And I said, I am. I said, I'm on a waiting list and I'm waiting to get help. And my mother didn't even listen to me. She didn't believe me. Well, here's what's weird. Here was the weird, fucked up part. Is that for some reason she convinced Tom that these things never happened. I mean, that's how powerful this woman is to get in his head. So then he starts agreeing with her. And I was like, what's happening? This is so weird. They're doing an intervention to me. And they're basically going against facts and logic. That was what's really weird about it, too. It's like, I could show you. I've made phone calls. And they wouldn't do it. Well, after my mother left, I ended up, that triggered me so bad that I ended up suicidal. So here's the thing. After the intervention, I went from being upset to being suicidal. That's what happened in that intervention. And so, not only that though, but she was not allowed to contact me. I made it very clear she wasn't allowed to contact me in the psych ward. She found a way to call me and to contact me there. So this is how controlling this abuser was in my life. And then I did find it interesting too, though. Once my mother left, I was able to talk to Tom, and I said, Tom, why were you agreeing with her when she thought that I was denying getting care? You remember, you were there with me when I made these calls. And he said, you're right, I'm so sorry. I said, I warned you about my mother. He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I mean, he was just immediately brainwashed. She got into his head like that and turned him against me. And she did that with my partner I had 5 years ago. She got him to side with her. And he was more abusive than she ever was. So my last partner, I said, don't you dare talk to my mother. I said, she will get in your head and she will make you believe anything about me that she possibly can. And luckily I kept those two apart. Because my last partner was not a strong-minded person. He would have fallen right for her stuff. And chances are, I know how to fuck with people's heads because that's all I've been around family and religion, and especially being around the gay community, the art community, the educational community. A lot of folks that I've been exposed to for a lot of my life are really good at fucking with people's heads. And that's what a lot of times an intervention is getting someone to believe that there's a whole different reality. And unfortunately, the subject a lot of times is somebody who is not in touch with reality. And ironically, like in this situation, the folks that were trying to intervene in my life were avoiding facts and over to gain power over my life. And I see that same thing happening when it comes to me. See, here's the thing, is that when folks are annoyed by what I'm doing, and when I pursue these things, like when someone says, oh, I'll connect you with this person, or I'll help you with this, or I've got this referral or this advice for you, that's their way of blowing me off. So I taunt them by following up and just say, hey, we spoke about this. I just want to follow up. I just want an update. That's all I do. And it's really weird to see what happens. That's been one of my projects lately. But I tell you what, if I let people take advantage of me like this and treat me unfairly, that will undermine my will to live. And I will self-destruct and I will die. And I will self-destruct even more than I'm doing now. But here's the other problem, is that when I fight, I'm fighting alone. Now, there are people that come to me and they're convinced that they're with me, but they do nothing. I am fighting this alone, and it is really weird how many people think that they're helping me, that they're not. I mean, it's so weird. That's one of the surreal things is that they've convinced themselves that they're actually being supportive, and it's just talk. And the talk is never acknowledging the gravity of the issue or what the problems really are. So here is my intervention. And I wanted to do 2 hours, so I'm going to just go for another 10 minutes or so. And I'm going to talk about the solution. Okay, here is part 6, or wherever it is I'm at right now. What is the solution to somebody who is losing control of their life? They need to be empowered, not overpowered. People who are losing control of their life, like this, like for instance, reaching for the bottle, and whether this is full of tequila or if it's just fucking water, the point is people don't choose to be alcoholics. They don't choose to keep drinking. They're out of control. They have no will left. They can't make decisions. You can't simply just scream and yell at a person and get them to gain control of their lives back. They have lost all their power, and instead here's an interesting thing. Powerless people still have the ability to give power to powerful people. And we see this all the time. I think homeless people are a great example. Homeless people are important to a community because they need people to lord over. It is essential for those who are addicted to power and influence to have people that they can lord over and influence. Last week when I was with these, quote, drunk Indians, I hate the way they were treated. I wish they were allowed to go in the place that I was locked out of too. That was really sad. And I loved hanging out with these people. They were so cool. I think they were Lakota. And I love the Lakota people. I used to hang out with them, and there was a group of Lakota people in Oregon. Speaking of Patrick Pinson and the drum makers back in Portland. So yes, these are very amazing, special people. And yet they are the subjects of folks' obsession to overpower folks. And one of the saddest things I saw as I was getting done with my activism was there's this woman who pulls up in a fancy SUV, and she gets out and she starts saying, "God bless you guys. I love you." And not I love you, but she said this more than once. "I'm praying for you guys. Are you hungry?" And they're like, in various states of drunkenness. Yeah. And so she puts on the ground this container full of leftovers, like a half of a hamburger or something like that. And they just eat it because, I'm like, that is so sad that, these folks needed to be empowered. They need to work. They need to have opportunities to work. They want to work. They want to contribute. But we won't let them, because once we let them contribute, that gives them power, which gives less power to those who have too much power. And that's the place that I'm at, too. That's one of the reasons why I get along with homeless people better than anybody else, is because they are closer to me in social status than any other people that I come across. And here I am in an $18,000 trailer. And I paid cash for last year. And at the same time, it doesn't matter how much money I have, as long as folks aren't listening to me. I have the same social status. Here it is. It's an object. This is the problem. Point to that. And as long as they get rid of the bottle, everything's fine. No, here's my answer. How do you empower somebody? How do you give somebody power? It's not just listening to them and nodding and saying, "Oh, okay, that's nice," or "That's whatever." Powerful people are really good at acting like they're doing something. But I tell you, it really doesn't mean getting your hands dirty and getting down there. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means some work. Usually it just means giving somebody an opportunity. I mean, not telling them where to go, not even opening a door. I'm talking about going through that door with this person, arm in arm, and saying, "This is my friend. She calls herself Red Bear. She is a Lakota native. She is homeless. And I think it'd be great if we found some ways to get her included in your group. And I'm going to make sure that you do. I'm going to be back, and I'm going to find out what we can do to have her do art, or maybe tell stories, or whatever it is, to make sure that she's seen, that she's heard." And then guess what happens? Magically, she's so empowered that she doesn't need this stuff. anymore. Because for a lot of us, alcohol and drugs are a reason to live, because what happens with substances like that is that there's a flow of energy when there's power. And we're in a society over the last several thousand years that is dependent on people that have too much power to stay there. We enable those people to stay there in power. And those who have less and less power, we enable those to stay in that place. And when they're hurting, they're suffering and causing other people suffering, we are just simply treating the symptoms and not the causes. And I hate saying that, because the people that say we're treating the symptoms and not the cause don't treat the symptoms, they treat the causes. The psychotherapy that I get, they treat symptoms. They don't even teach you that in school these days. They want you to get to the root causes of stuff, but they just simply don't do that. Because in order to do that, it's going to take something beyond their job duties. It's going to take what I consider an intervention. If I'm intervening in the life of somebody who is powerless and ignored, that means I'm going to have to give them responsibility, power, authority, some type of meaningful thing where they can be seen and heard, they can be considered, they can be acknowledged for what they do, for what they've suffered, especially. They can tell their story, they can be heard. And I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to do that in most places that I go to, except homeless communities, because that's my social status. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You'd say, okay, I'm accepted here, I'm not accepted here. I'm accepted here, I'm not accepted here. I do the math, and I think my social status is right along there with homeless people, no matter how many skills I have, no matter what my functioning level is, no matter how much money I have, no matter how I'm well connected. I am really well connected. A lot of very powerful people know what I can do. It's just that they are scared. And what they're scared of is that if people like me are heard, that means less people, or how do I say it? If more people like me get attention or publicity or being heard or whatever it is, especially artists or those that have a story to tell, that doesn't necessarily mean that powerful people are going to be heard less. But it does scare them. I mean, it really scares them. It scares them enough. I've never seen anybody actually literally take my sidewalk chalk and try to sweep it with their feet or sweep it with their broom. And it's happened now more than once this week. So here's the thing, is that I'm thinking, oh my God, people are really working hard to erase me. And not just me, but a lot of people like me. And I've said this before, though, but you want to find the health of a community. You find the ones who are the homeless people, or not necessarily a town, just any kind of community, like a church. Find out the people who aren't allowed to be in power in the church. Find out the people who aren't treated equal in that church or that community. Find the folks that are outcasts. Those are the testimonies we need to hear when it comes to the funding. I was looking at one of these organizations, and they were talking about this fake group that they have that's very exclusive, that looks inclusive, but it's not. And all the funding that they get, and they listed all the people. It would be really funny to call these people and say, hey, you're funding this art organization? They excluded me. They literally locked me out. And I've been pursuing an art career for 30 years, and I couldn't even get in as an, what they call, oh no, I can't even remember what they called it. Emerging artist. I couldn't even be recognized as an emerging artist. And I've been developing skills and experience and product for decades. It's just my social status, and they refuse to recognize social status. It was interesting. I looked up the nostrils of those presidents yesterday, and it's such a reminder of when you're at the top, you don't see. You just don't see how you're treating people down below. You only see how you're being treated from above. Because you're not traumatized when you're abusing people. You're only traumatized when you're being abused. And I tell you what, it is a feeling that people get when they are lording themselves over me, it's fully justified. They feel powerful. They feel safe. They feel heard. Um, there's a lot of perks to power. Some of it is more sex, more money, more security. And it makes them feel right. It makes them feel good. It's just when people like me come along and say, hey, it's a lot of people that have too much power. Artists need power to have a career. And I'm going to make sure that I have what I deserve, whether it annoys people or not. And it's made my life miserable. And I have no regrets for doing it. And unfortunately, it's putting me in a place where I'm losing control. And so if there was ever an intervention where people said, Jason, you need help, here's the one thing I would say. I would say, I need help. And there's only one kind of help that is going to get me to gain control over my life, over bad habits, over depression, over losing control. And that has to do with one thing, is I need to contribute. And contributing means I get to work. And with my particular job, that work means doing my art, telling my story. That's enabling me to have a lot of influence. And that scares people because I was not a born leader. I was a born follower. People don't put followers in places of power unless they can control that power, and they can't control me anymore. I'm just getting a little too old for that. So if there's ever an intervention and everybody's decided what I need, and believe me, I've gotten all the mental health support I can get in this area. I've gotten all the vocational support I can get in this area, in every place that I've been to just about, especially my hometown. And it's not adequate. It's not available. It's not affordable. And in most, some like here, counterproductive. So that's the sad reality of what a lot of interventions are. The ones that I've experienced in my life. And to intervene in someone's life is to not just open a door for them in order for them to be included, in order for them to have meaning in their life, but to go through that door and to make sure that they are treated as an equal. And wouldn't that be funny if people did that? Because there's I think in Portugal or some place overseas, they decided to say, let's fuck drug and alcohol recovery. Let's see what would happen if we just include these people in society, put a high value on them, and allow them to contribute. Well, it worked. You know what's weird about things that work? Is that a lot of folks don't do them. And there's a lot of reasons why people do a lot of things that don't work. And you can always, and almost always, when you see stupid things going on with powerful people, when you see a job full of people who are doing stupid things because their boss told them to do it, their boss is telling them to do that because that boss is more interested in getting power than making sense. They're abusing their power. And that's why I think this country is such a mess, because we've had folks abusing their power, and we have the best abuser of power, which is King and Emperor, our beloved Trump, who is so overly addicted to power. It's pathological. And the folks that are fighting the president, most of these people are what I call little Trumps. And I don't see them as too much different if they're acting like him. They're making my life miserable. They're making it impossible for me to do my work. All I want to do is do my work and to contribute. I don't want to turn into an alcoholic, but I am. Unless things change, unless they change very soon. So That's my virtual intervention, as depressing as it is. And I'd like people to actually give me their thoughts about what's actually in these bottles. I'll give you a hint. It does taste a little bit like coconut. Well, thank you, Tiffany, Captain Beefheart, and all those who are watching in the future. Thank you for 2 hours of my ranting, and hopefully I have been able to accomplish something. Fake Zappa for president. Fake Zappa loves you.